Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Midgards Messer, the Viking. It's actually called the Viking. I think, by most people's definition, this is going to be an overbuilt knife. It is definitely a hulking, massive knife. This, I remember seeing this a long time ago and thinking, that is definitely right up my alley. I'll have to make a note to grab one for myself at some point. This was a limited run. This is number 129 of 200. When I finally got around to seeking this thing out, I realized, oh, they're sold out. So this was loaned to me by a viewer, and I messaged the person. I said, hey, would you consider selling it to me? And he did. So this is mine now. It's part of my permanent collection. I've really enjoyed the owner of the company actually reached out to me after I posted this knife on Instagram, and I really enjoyed getting to know him and also just getting the details behind this thing. And I can't wait to share all of this information with you guys. There is, if you're wondering, why are you showing this if this is discontinued, right? I mean, sure, we can get it on the secondary market, so the review, is still beneficial for some people, but why would you show it? They're planning on apparently bringing this back in an updated form. They're doing a new one at some point. That's all the information I have right now, but I thought it might be interesting to some people. Thanks so much to my patrons who are supporting me right now. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. A lot of Midgards Messer knives are sold at Tools for Gents. I'm going to link them right down below so you guys can check them out if you want. If you live outside the United States, you might actually be familiar with that retailer. This company is based in Germany, and they're fixed blades. All of their fixed blades are made in-house, but these folding knives are actually, the OEM behind the folding knives is Concept Knives. So that's actually who made this knife. And the owner was very straightforward with me. I said, who's your OEM? And he said, these are done by Concept. And he always does them in limited runs of 200. So anyways, we'll talk more about that here in a sec. Let's go ahead and get some specs. This is, it's big. Overall length of the Viking is coming in at 9.5 inches. You could say 9.6 if you want to include the back end of this backspacer here. The blade length is coming in at about 4 1/8, and the cutting edge is it's actually slightly more than 4 inches. How about some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2? I think that'll give you some perspective here. I think a lot of people, posting this on Instagram and putting it in some shorts, people made reference to it. It looks like a Medford. Yeah, it has a fuller, and it is big, and yeah, that's about it, right? That's that's generally the similarities, right, that create the foundation for that type of comment. And while I can understand that, right, I mean, it's hard for any big, massive, overbuilt knife to not look like a Medford, especially when it's got a big tall blade and if it has a fuller in it. But we got lots of knives out there with fullers. We got lots of knives out there that are big, that are thick, and also have big and thick handles, right? I mean, that's not an exclusively Medford thing. So yeah, it's got some passing similarities, but anybody who's ever held the knife that it is, most compared to, I think, is the Medford Praetorian Tie or the Medford Praetorian T. If you handled these two knives side by side, I can promise you they are wildly different. Absolutely. Outside of the fact that it's a frame lock, right? It's a big knife. But yeah, I get it. Okay, fair enough. Let's go ahead and do some more size comparisons up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Still gigantic. Do we need to keep doing these? How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bugouts? All right, how about some other big knives? You know what? I've actually got two other Midgards Messer knives that are currently here. I have another one that is sold out and one that is not sold out. I'm going to go ahead and show them off here real quick. Excuse me, I'm removing the pins because these knives have double locks. Here it is up against another gigantic knife from Midgards Messer. This is the Beowulf. This one is also sold out. You will get a review on this one at some point. And here it is up against their model that is currently available, the Thunrar. Believe it or not, this thing looks super short, but this is actually still 8 inches, right? These guys are both incredibly thick. The Thunrar is actually a little bit thicker. So there you go. If you're ever wondering, right, if you've seen some of these knives around, there you go. There's a good couple of good comparisons. We'll do reviews on those down the road. Let's go ahead and talk about the action here. This knife is actually running on phosphor bronze, and it is very smooth. Now, the drop shot action absolutely can be attributed to the weight and mass of the blade. But on top of that, it actually is very smooth on the inside. This is kind of cool that it's on phosphor bronze. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that this is going to be a big and cumbersome knife to actually carry. You're committing to a lot of knife in your pocket if you're really going to carry this. And I'm sure that some people will and do, right? But yeah, that's just, the fact is that most people are going to go, wow, that's a lot of knife thing in my pocket, right? But if you were going to use it, it's nice that it has phosphor bronze washers. Why? Because it'll actually keep debris out of the pivot while you're using it, which is, something that cannot be said for knives that run on bearings. But you still get that satisfying drop shutty action. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's thick. It's probably not quite as thick as you might have thought, but it's definitely way thicker than the Para 3. Up against the PM2 and Para 3, just for an idea, right, if you regularly carry one of these, it's way longer and way taller. In fact, I think the PM2 can actually, or the Para 3 can actually fit completely and totally inside of the profile of this knife. So yeah, it's big, right? There is no double clutch on this, and it's actually really easy to disengage thanks to a large cutout there, some nice chamfering on the inside, and you can get it to drop here just on the tang of the blade. The detent ball is already up on the face of the blade, so it makes it actually pretty easy to disengage. Opening it up, I really honestly like to do kind of a one-handed pinch where I do this and then I just wheel it around, which very much, that's really the one part of this knife to me that reminds me of a Medford, right? But this is way easier to open. It's nowhere near as tight, right? The detent is not quite, while it's appropriate, right? It's not nearly as strong. So it is easier. You can get this if you really want to. You can sort of use wrist, and I wouldn't recommend this, honestly, because it's a good way to cut yourself, but you can kind of do that. And truthfully, it's safer and just less, right? If you're going to do that, it's only going to be to show off, right? Just open it with 2 hands or sort of wheel it out like this, or do what I like to do, which is pinch open it and then wheel it out. Makes more sense. It is not the most convenient knife to deploy, and it is a little bit clunky and awkward, but as is the case with all things, once you adapt to it, you can do it pretty easily. It's actually, pretty comfortable to manipulate. It's not really wearing my hands out or anything like that, which is kind of surprising because it looks pretty aggressive, like it might bite you. Yeah, it's not too bad. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of blade stock thickness here real quick, just while I've got the calipers handy. They always like to kind of run away from me. Blade stock thickness is... It is approaching 1/4 inch. That is a thick blade for a pocket knife. We normally do not see that. While there are knives out there, plenty, you've seen plenty on this channel that are quite a bit thicker than that. This is definitely on, it's not just on the thick side, it's on the mega thick side of the folding knife world. There are nowhere near as many that are, this thick versus just like your common pocket knife. So it is definitely thick. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I'm pretty sure the pivot is a T10. Yeah, I think I checked it. T10, you gotta have, you're gonna have to have 2 different drivers there. And then all of these body screws are actually T8, which is really nice. The construction here, even the pocket clip screws are T8. The construction is very simple. There's no milling on the inside, right? Not that weight reduction would really help this thing all that much. But if you want to take this thing apart, it is extremely simple, right? It should be very familiar to anybody who's ever taken apart a simple frame lock. Not a lot of parts, good to go. That's what I like to see. Let's see here, weight. Yeah, we got to do weight. What are we looking at for materials? A lot of titanium. This is a lot of titanium. The blade is CPM D2. Now, I know that's going to bum some people out, right? D2 belongs on, budget. CPM D2 is made by Crucible. It is the powder-formed version of D2. There's a lot of reports on there on like how it reports. how it performs versus regular D2. A lot of that is, of course, going to depend heavily on geometry and, of course, how well it is heat treated. From what I understand, when we are actually comparing apples to apples, meaning properly heat treated D2, not talking about that 58 Rockwell stuff they're trying to pass off as properly heat treated in some of the production knives we see today. I'm talking about D2 that's actually running where it is supposed to be, which is, I think, 61, 62, maybe 63. CPM D2 will outperform regular D2. By how much? It really varies, right? I used to think that CPM D2 would massively outperform regular D2 in terms of edge retention. Averaging everything out that I've read, it definitely performs better. I don't think it's massively better, but it is better. Now, the nice thing about D2 and this composition is that it is not stainless, but it's very close, right? 12% chromium, I think 14%, of course, that, you have to balance it out with the carbon content to determine whether or not it's actually stainless. It's just under the line of a stainless steel. So you still get, decently beneficial stainless qualities. It's also pretty tough. This geometry is definitely going to add to the toughness. That edge is super thick. Think what you will about D2. This is definitely the premium version of it. And we have to remember that we do definitely see steels like, right, the ever-worshipped, the blindly worshipped CPM 20CV steel, which we just are like, yeah, if it's premium, it has to have that steel. We see that on knives that cost under $100 sometimes, right? Now, would it be better to see this in a better steel, a more premium steel? Yes, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So the steel on this is CPM D2. Anyways, weight. Let's go ahead and do this here real quick. The weight is coming in at a whopping 12 ounces. I don't think that's really a shock to anybody. It is a big, heavy knife, and you're going to have to commit to it if you want to carry this thing. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the meat and potatoes here. This is extremely satisfying to hold. This is not what I would call a practical day-to-day cutting tool, right? I'm the type of person who uses their pocket knives for regular day-to-day stuff, right? That means cutting open packages, right? Periodically, I'll cut like a zip tie, or I'll cut into plastic, rope, rubber, things like that. Sometimes wood, it just depends on what I'm doing. This or pretty much any other pocket knife I'm not gonna take out and baton. I don't have a need to baton wood every single day, and even if you do, you probably don't use your folding knife to do that. So this is a big, heavy, crazy, overbuilt knife, and I think it's obviously going to be tougher than something like a Benchmade bug out, but does it need to be able to baton wood to be worthy of the title of tough or overbuilt? I don't think so. But if you think so, that's fine. You can think whatever you want. I still would not baton with a folding knife. But honestly, the satisfaction that I get from this thing is not, it doesn't come from whether or not I think it can withstand a bomb blast or anything like that. I just think it's really cool that it's big and overbuilt. And honestly, the joy that I get from holding this is really just from that. It is certainly substantial enough to hold up to, what you would normally expect from a pocket knife, and then probably a little bit more. It's still a frame lock, right? And frame locks are not going to be as strong as something like the Triad lock or the Shark lock or locks with additional pins or anything like that. Honestly, his other models have the pin lock. But, is it going to stand up to some light chopping, serious, heavy, continuous cutting? Oh yeah, and honestly, even if you are doing a little bit of twisting and things like that, heavy, thick geometry with, very little tip is going to save the blade from fracturing, right? I'm not suggesting you go out and abuse your knives, but I guess if you're going to, something like this is gonna hold up a little bit better, right? Save for the lock, which has the same limitations as any other frame lock. But certainly, again, still plenty capable. It's just really funny, picking this thing up, it honestly feels like I'm holding on to what was once a much longer blade, right? It's almost like this was a sword. And then they just decided, you know what, let's just chop 80% of the blade off of it and make it a folding knife. It really feels gigantic. And right when you pick it up, it just feels awesome. This is actually really comfortable to hang on to. This is perfectly, it's almost perfect. Well, I say perfect for my hands. Honestly, even if your hands are a little bigger than mine, I wear an XL glove If your hands are a little bit bigger than mine, it'll be even more comfortable. There's a choke up point too, which is amazingly comfortable. This is like, honestly, it feels ready to go, right? As soon as you pick it up, it feels awesome. And these edges here are nicely knocked down. That frag texturing is nowhere near as aggressive as it looks. It's actually, you know, soft enough to where it's not really gonna bite into your hands too much if you're gonna use it for an extended period of time, but certainly welcome and will add additional traction if you are, you know, wearing gloves. The lock-in on the jimping back here is great because this is sort of ramped. It just really you're not gonna drop this thing. You're gonna have to throw it, which would be, you know, devastating to be on the other end of this. I think the comment I keep getting is that thing would do more damage just being thrown, right? And yeah, it might, right? Yeah, it's really impressive. You know, this right here, initially I was like, oh man, they like put this big crazy like laser mark on it. I kind of like it. You know, it kind of, this knife definitely has its own character. It's kind of just doing its own thing. And, you know, so I kind of, it's kind of quirky in some ways, and it's kind of like ultra crazy serious, you know, and the balance of that is just, it's just kind of fun for me. I can't say that I really mind this too much. The fit and finish on this thing all the way around is very, very good. And it doesn't surprise me at all that Concept is behind this knife. They did a really good job, and it's the same level of quality that I expect from other Concept knives. And I've reviewed, I don't know, 30 on this channel for sure. Something that I love, in fact, the part of this knife that I love the most, and I think, sorry, I'm just getting fingerprints off of it. The part of this knife that I love the most, and I think what other people are gonna like the most, is the blade. The blade is really cool. It's big, chunky, aggressive. I mean, it's just got aggro written all over it. I don't like that it says the Viking in a really basic font on the blade, but what are you gonna do about that? On the other side, it's got the maker's logo on both sides, and then it says 129 and 200. I could not find anywhere on the blade where it says CPM D2, but it is factually CPM D2. This edge, you know, if you've been looking at this and thinking, do they all come with mirror edges? No. This had to have been done by the previous owner, or perhaps even the person who owned it before him. He has this thing extremely sharp, right? And if you've made it to this point in the video, I'm gonna demonstrate. You know, usually, here's the thing. With a blade that's big and thick, if you're new to the knife world, a blade that's big and thick, right, you can make anything sharp. You know, you can reprofile something and make it super thin behind the edge. You can leave it thick behind the edge, but still have it razor sharp, right? But if you're gonna use this to process material, right, let's say you're cutting thick styrofoam, cardboard, or something like that, you're gonna have to push the entire wedge through the material. And it's just not going to be as easy or convenient to do as, you know, using something like an Opinel that has incredibly thin geometry. But at the edge, oh my God, it's crazy sharp. Was it like that from the factory? I don't know, probably not, right? But it'll definitely still slice and still cut. It's just not going, there's always going to be a better cutting geometry for continuous cutting, right? If your goal is continuous and efficient cutting, this is not going to do it as well as 99.9% of the other knives on the market. But then again, I don't feel like the people who buy this are necessarily looking for that type of cutting performance. The blade fuller is awesome. It comes all the way out to here, passes this secondary. You can see it's actually a little bit of a tanto. This is rounded. This area is very thick out here. Got a little stubby tip. It technically does have a tip, but oh my gosh, it is crazy thick out there. So all looks great, and it's got a nice high polished tumbled finish, which is my favorite finish on the, I love this finish. It looks so good, and it'll hold up. Man, if you're gonna beat on this thing, it's gonna take scratches and marks and things like that, but it's gonna do it well. It's gonna look good after a while. This finish also, because it's got a polish on it, is going to help resist corrosion a little bit better, right? The higher the polish, the better that composition will be at resisting corrosion, right? So if you have a truly stainless composition and it's got a mirror polish on it, it's definitely going to resist better than the exact same composition with, say, a bead blasted finish or an acid washed finish, right? So anyways, I really like the finish. The blade just looks, all the grinds, like all the lines are just perfect. They are exactly the same on both sides. I wish I could have judged the factory edge, but you know, this is fine. Doesn't bother me. This, to my knowledge, all of them have blue hardware. I don't think they made I know that there's a smaller one. In fact, I have it here, and that would have been a great size comparison. I should have dug it out, but The smaller one has all steel, well, all satin hardware, and this has blue hardware. I cannot find a version of the large one that does not have the blue hardware. So to my knowledge, they all have blue hardware. Looks fine. I think I would have preferred it just with the satin hardware, but that's just a preference. There is a gigantic lanyard hole, so you can put a lanyard on it if you want. I think, you know, it looks like the screw holes would accept the clip on the other side, but the clip would have to be reversed. The curvature of the clip would have to be reversed. Do they offer a left-handed clip? I do not know. I very much doubt it. I wish that this was just a perfectly straight clip, or that they had made it at least in a way that we could mount it for left-handed carry, because honestly, yeah, I mean, you can still lefties, or you're probably used to manipulating right-handed frame locks, right? The knife world just isn't made for you. I don't know why they don't make more left-handed knives, right? It seems like the ratio of left-handed knives to left-handed people who are interested in knives is not very good, but anyways, it would have been nice to have a left-handed mountable clip. The clip, let's talk about it. It's freaking huge. Oh my gosh. Here's the clip on the rat. Here's the clip on the Ritter Hogue, right? Well, it's a bigger knife. The total amount of space of the handle that it occupies it's a larger percentage. It will absolutely seat deep in your pocket. It's very unlikely this thing is accidentally going to come flying out. And honestly, it carries fairly deep with most of that blade hidden. You're really only going to see about that much of the knife, which is impressive. The thing that I like is that it is flat and it's wide, which means it does not create a hot spot on your hand. You can feel the clip there, but it's not a hot spot. The thing that I don't like, man, that's shallow. It actually tapers back down, which makes it kind of difficult to get up over the seam of your pocket with one hand. You kind of have to use two hands and fight it a little bit, right? Okay. There is a steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop, so that's fine. This has one of the biggest stop pins that I have ever seen. Oh my gosh. There's not really any shouldering there, and it has another stop pin for the closed position. So it's just a single contact point, no blade plate, no hint of movement whatsoever, and honestly, I don't think it's not going to disengage. It's just, I mean, unless you are, I don't really like that test, right? But the geometry of a frame lock is really important. If you can't get the geometry correct, then that, that frame lock is going to disengage with the right, or depending on how you view it, the wrong amount of pressure, right? So if you're cutting with this thing in some really weird circumstance, less than optimal, blade tang and lock face geometry, right? If you're kind of twisting and pulling it back out, it could technically disengage if it doesn't have the right geometry. Fortunately for this knife, it's got great geometry on the lock face, and there's plenty of contact. So you can see here, the contact there is really good. I think this is probably locking up at 35, maybe 40%, not something that I'm gonna worry about. On top of that, like I said, we have no up and down play. We have no side to side play. There's no stick. There's no pivot lash. This is it's glassy smooth inside of the pivot. And we have a nice, it's kind of a thud, but it's a nice detent. And then I think this has come slightly off center since I've owned it. It will probably, it's mainly for me, I think, opening and closing it. It will probably recenter just by turning the pivot. It's really hard to judge since I think I'm now the third owner of this thing. You'll have to let me know if you own this knife, if yours came centered. I honestly haven't messed with it. I usually do, but I haven't really messed with it, so I don't know. I can't really judge it all that much. There's also no detent lash or anything like that in the closed position. So yeah, it's about as solid as I would want something like this to be, and it is extremely well made. What was the original price on this knife? The original retail price on this knife, I got this directly from the company behind it, was $300. We usually see, right, normally I'm like, well, you can't necessarily be like, oh, it's got to be more money just because it's bigger. But this is a lot bigger. To be fair, this is a lot more material, even if we are looking at just CPM D2, and just titanium. It is a lot of titanium. Arguably, there's enough titanium here to make 2 knives at least out of Concept's regular line, right? There's also enough D2 steel here to make about 3 blades, right? Now, that being said, I wish that it was at S35VN. I wish that it was stainless, right? I wish that it was completely stainless, and I like S35VN a lot better. Does it need to be 20CV? No, I don't think 20CV is the right steel for this. S35VN, S45VN, or LMAX would have felt really good at $300. But, you know, D2, even the CPM D2, right? I've defended that steel in the past, but do I feel like it belongs on a $300 knife? There are still custom knife makers out there who use CPM D2 and even regular D2 on knives that cost way more. This, you know, I think the people who are interested in picking this knife up would appreciate something like S35, S45, or LMAX. I do not know if they plan to change the steel for this updated version that they have hinted at. I think that that would be a good idea. I'm kind of with, you know, honestly, even like CPM 154, which is truthfully probably, it costs about the same to buy it from Crucible, right? CPM D2 is not a cheap material to buy from Crucible. It's actually somewhat expensive, right? It is definitely more expensive than regular ingot formed D2 or steels like 14C28N, 154CM, right? Non-powder form steels. Is it going to measure up to the sort of optimal balance that we expect from a modern folding knife versus the other stuff that we generally see in this territory? I don't know. I think for a lot of people, you know, it's just going to be more like, I wish it had a better steel, right? And I kind of get that. So outside of that, though, this has got to be one of the most satisfying large knives to not only hold, but deploy and put away. I mean, there is something really, really satisfying about picking this thing up and just holding it, right? I think that continuous use with this thing is going to tire you out just from the weight of it. And also, right, I mean, I know it's like, it's just 12 ounces, but imagine using this thing for a solid half hour, right? I mean, imagine using a hammer for a solid half, like your arms get tired, right? That's not necessarily the best example, but I think, you know, more so just pushing this giant wedge of a blade through material, right? Now, it's certainly going to do a little bit better at light, like, I don't know that the company wants you to chop with it, right? So ask them about what will and won't void any sort of warranty that might be in place. If you were to take this knife and you were to take the Ontario Rat 1, which is a full-size knife, right? And you were to do a light chopping contest, well, this is going to do better, right? So that's a pretty specific circumstance that, you know, most people are not going to find themselves in with a pocket knife, but maybe there's a benefit there for some people. This is basically just, you know, an item that people are going to want to own on cool factor alone. And I get it, you know, and I bought it. I bought this secondary. I just really think that this knife is cool. Can I recommend it to the average person? No. No. If you want a good, you know, convenient and, you know, efficient cutting tool, well, you have a billion options out there, and this is not going to be convenient. If you want to add something interesting to your collection and you like big, monstrous, overbuilt knives, oh yeah, definitely. I love overbuilt knives, and I now have my own little collection of them. This is like a must-own for people who love stuff like that, right? Price is a little Material's not my favorite blade material, you know, even with something this big and crazy and robust, but that's, a lot of that comes down to preference. I don't think it was horribly priced for what it was. I think the new one is going to come in at about $350. I think, I don't know. I think that they're going to come up a little bit, just judging by, you know, what some of their other stuff currently costs. So, yeah. This is absolutely, despite it not being a recommendable knife, not being a super practical knife, right? This is definitely one of my favorite knives that has ever come across my tables. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in my favorite knives of all time playlist. But again, that doesn't mean that I am openly recommending it. I have a separate playlist for knives that I, genuinely recommend that people pick up for day-to-day use. But it is very cool. I like it a lot. Really cool stuff from Midgards Messer. I like their style. I like their, kind of their design language. It's just cool. So Anyways, I think that's going to be pretty much it today. This is kind of a long video, but I wanted to do this knife justice. Glad to finally have an opportunity to review it. Thanks to the gentleman who let me buy it from him. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.